What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money, investing in fractional real estate online. Today, I want to do something a little bit different. I've been spending a lot of time telling you different ways that I've been working on making money on Lofty. Some of the quicker flip type investments, and I think it's been a little while since I showed you some of the longer term holds that I purchased. But I think I've one of the things that I start to worry about is I think I might give you too rosy of a picture, right? When I am telling you that I'm spending time in here every day, I believe I'm making money. I think I'm picking up some nice little investments that I'm gonna, so many of which I think will just be a quick return by selling something. Well, I want to point out a couple of things, and the first thing is on every discounted token that I buy, and if and we sell the property and we make money on it, that discount means that somebody else lost money on that same token. And so I want to make sure that's not lost on you, right? One of the things that I want to point out is that, Lofty is creating a marketplace. They're creating a place where people can come and, put their property equity basically up for sale and other people can come in and buy pieces of it. They're not necessarily, well, they're not at all doing anything to make sure that the properties that are listed on there are good or bad investments, right? And so they've done a couple of things lately that I think um just sort of show that. So like they we had this list view before as the default, and I think this is great, and it gives us a lot more detail before clicking into the properties. They went back to this old tile view, and the discussion in the Discord is really that um, basically they just think they get better. New people to the site are more likely to click on one of these and buy something than they are using the more detailed view where you have a lot more details, but you're not presented with this picture of a property in an attractive way that makes you want to click on it and buy it. So that's just sort of a reminder that what they're trying to do is get people to come on here and buy, not necessarily uh, whether or not you make money on those investments is not their number one priority at all. They're also, they mess with their features of, they added this dark mode, which is perfectly fine. Like if all of the info on the site was completely perfect and all the numbers worked great, I would have no problem with them wanting to tinker with the way it looks and the click through and how much they're selling. But one of the things that does kind of start to bother me when they do all these sorts of bells and whistles, but we still can't get good details as far as the numbers on properties are concerned. And so one of the other things that they recently added, and I don't think I really talked about this much, is the ability to write a review for properties. But you have to own tokens in that property, which I think is a little problematic because, so for example, if I want to sell all my tokens and I'm planning to write a bad review, well, I don't want to put that bad review up before I sell because that's hurting me, right? I'm saying bad things about something I'm trying to sell. Doesn't make a ton of sense. And so, I think that that's a little bit problematic from an incentive standpoint. I mean, in this one, I picked a property that I like. I own some of this one and I like it. And, it has 5-star reviews. This is another one that I own and like. It's just got one review. It's 5-star. But, one of the things I want to just point out is this is not something that you should be putting a lot of stock in, right? Like, you don't know who these people are that are put of the reviews. They do tell you how many tokens they own. But at the same time, like if you own a whole bunch of tokens in this property, um, of course you have an incentive to sort of talk it up because that makes the tokens work. Anything that might influence someone into making a buying decision, to make them worth more. I don't really love that. I don't think it's a feature that is very helpful, especially, when one of the things that we are still waiting for is just really clean income and expense data on a monthly basis, presented in a way that's easy to understand. So I'll give you another example. This is one that I own um, only 25 tokens in, so not a whole bunch. Um, it is, uh, but it's got mostly bad reviews. This one is actually one that I've seen spammed in a couple of different ones. They basically copied and pasted the same bad review in several different ones. I don't think they're wrong, although this one I don't know if this one in particular had any squatters in it, but one of them that they started with did, and they just sort of copied and pasted it everywhere. But this is certainly, if you look at the price of this, it's half the price where it was initially purchased. My guess is this person probably um, purchased it at the higher price. Maybe they just held a couple of tokens so they could make a review. Maybe they only ever owned two tokens, but that $100 that they invested meant a lot to them, and now that it's worth 50, that's pretty aggravating. And so, the fact that these they do have some negative reviews. It's kind of against their interests, but I want to show you what I mean by like it's still really hard from just looking at the platform to understand how this property is doing, right? So it's getting only 1.98% yield. Trying to figure out, okay, why is that? Well, it's because they have a rule in place where it's until the operating reserve is completely full, 50% of their cash flow is going towards replenishing the operating reserve, and the other 50% is getting sent to us. I don't believe that that's still everything though, because they're saying based on the monthly cash flow of 863. But this is a 3-unit property with and let me show you something else before we go on to the next thing. So, and this is the amount that, okay, when the operating reserve balance is above this amount, 11,526, that's when we start to get half of it. And so if we look at the operating reserve chart, we can see, we're dealing with, you can see in September it was above that number, but then it went back below, or no, and it's still above it at in October, right? So we just crossed over that line, and so I think what happened is, but there's also been like some issues as far as some repairs and maintenance happening at the same time, and so sometimes that gets kind of convoluted, right? Like at a single point in time, it was above this, but then it went down, but it stayed just a little bit. And so I think what's happening is you're getting a fraction of the cash flow paid out, but it's not really a full 50% because it's only like, okay, once they pass this number, then half of it goes to here and half goes to the other. I think that's what's happening here. I'm not completely sure. When you look at, okay, occupancy status, right? Like, I mean, they've been on a month to month since 2022. Assuming this is true, but it would be nice to actually get some verification of that. Like when you look in here, there's not a rent roll. The only actual transactions that you can see, and this is one of the reasons why I spend so much time looking at this operating reserve chart, because essentially this does show you your cash flows, right? Like, okay, it was going way up, came down, but I mean this is showing your net cash flow each month. So there's definitely a decent amount of movement here in the months that it is full. Significantly higher than that $800 figure that they showed. But like when they present these are the only transactions that we get. And if you look, we only have through 9:30 right now, right? Well, we're at we're November 27th. And so this is one of the things that just to me gets a little bit frustrating, right? Like we're not getting numbers. That's not even the right property anymore. We're not getting numbers from these in a timely basis. Um, and instead of, and they're not presented in a way that you're really confident, like that this is this month. I did ask them to start putting, when this was last updated, and they did put that here, which is, the person that's updating this all the time. But I'd really love to see like whenever this info is updated, that it's in there because, like, for example, this one shows a lease, um, that expired a couple days ago, right? Like, is that accurate? Was there a new lease? Maybe there is, right? Like, but I shouldn't have to go down here to figure that out. Like, it should be pretty easy to present a rent roll, to show, I can look at this financials tab, but this is just 1 month. Like, I'd much rather have, that info shown, like, okay, what was October? What was, January, February, March, April, May? Like, they did these numbers every single month this year, presenting those somewhere so we can actually see what's been going on. I think would be immensely more useful than, you know, reading what this guy has to say. Oh, are these not going to open up? I go back to that tab and see that. You know, I think having that data is way more useful than saying this property is mostly underachieved, right? And so, but what they're, I think the goal is with this is like, I mean, stuff like this is pretty good, right? When you can start to read about, okay, the manager is responsive and, active on the platform. That's some good info, right? That this is the person's favorite property, I think is not that useful. But so I think that it might be a situation, consistently good. Okay, that's nice to know on this one, and I own some of this, and it has been consistently good since I bought it. But it would be even better is if I could see what this rental yield was that was paid out every single month since it was added to the platform. And that data exists. They have to have that data. Presenting it on the page shouldn't be that difficult. And so when you just really start to think about, what they are doing, their goal is to just get someone to come to the site, click on a property and buy it. And it doesn't necessarily match up great with the goal of just giving us the best possible deal. It's a little aggravating to think about that. And actually, whenever I've interacted with them, I don't necessarily think that like is in the forefront of their mind. I think, they're like, yeah, we'd love to give you better data. We're working on it. It's going to come out. But then in the meantime, they do all these other little bells and whistle things that to me are just like fluff. And but my guess is they have a much larger impact on whether or not someone comes in and actually buys something, um, which is their goal, versus the stuff that I'm really hoping for is what would help us make better investment decisions, and so that we can, avoid the losers and buy the winners in the long run. And that isn't, it's not that they want you to buy losers, but they want you to buy everything, right? And so, um, that that my goal on the platform, and I think what most investors' goal on the platform is just not really what they're necessarily, um, looking to help, right? Like it doesn't, if they were, I think that it would, uh, I think there'd be a much bigger focus on giving us financials and up to date information. I keep clicking on this tab, which is not useful because this is just their, staking tab, which we're not talking about today. So sorry about that. But I mean, seeing this token price history, that's fantastic. But I'd much rather see a rental yield history, right? Like if I could see what was happening with the rental yield every single month. And one of the things when I was asking about this, one of the people that works at Lofty was like, well, yeah, but if it had a big negative and they don't have the context, then that's not helpful. One, I think that's not true. I think more data is always going to be better. But if there's, a big dip in the rental yield, like this one has none right now, it'd be fantastic to have a note that month and said, hey, there it was cash flowing and they replenished the reserve X dollars, right? Because they also have that history. And I mean, you can actually see when you look at the documents on this one that, what is going on from a cash flow standpoint. Like this is what what strikes me as odd is they have to have that data to be able to do this, right? Like to show you, okay, we're replenishing this reserve. Um, the math is done to show how much went into that reserve each month, and so we can see, okay, so um, there's no cash getting paid out on this property this month, right? We're getting zero yield, but our reserve went up, you know, $2,000, $2,500 over that same course of time. So, all of that without having to like open up documents, read between the lines, would be what's really helpful. And so I just want to point that out, right? Like to just keep in mind that despite all the things I've talked about as far as the opportunities to make money on here, I still really believe that there are. But you very much just have to not get mesmerized by the pretty user interface and the numbers that they present on the surface, because um, those aren't just necessarily they don't necessarily have anything to do with the return that you're going to make in the long run. And so over time, I think you should start to figure out what can I trust on the platform as far as numbers. And so for me, what I really trust more than anything is I look at that operating reserve chart. I look at the um, I actually look at the transactions. These are almost always old though. We hardly ever have them. Um, it seems like they're always like a full month old at least. But this is like almost 2 full months at this point. And it just got put in there 17 days ago. So like there's a pretty big lag on that data. Um, but regardless, being able to see that I think is really helpful. Being able to see the actual leases and read them is helpful. And so what I try to do on each one of these is try to, build my own picture of what's going on, right? Like, I think that for the most part, this details tab, the unit, that tells you, okay, it's 2 units and these rental rates. I think that so far, I've been pretty confident when it shows a lease that's expires sometime in the future. I feel pretty good about this data. When we have a situation like this one, it always makes me worry, right? Where it shows that it expired over a year ago. So I don't know that that's the rental rate. Um, and that's when I really start trying to dig into all the notes and see, like, okay, so obviously the tenant in Unit 2 has an outstanding rent balance, and they have a number, and I can compare it to what's going on up here, and it's it doesn't even really match up. So, um, and actually, even if you look at this, yeah, those add up together, but I think down here was like a little bit different. So that's, I guess, really all I wanted to talk about today is that I just think there are things that, you just have to try to sift through the info and figure out what are they presenting me that's good. And then, what do I have to ignore or see if I can recreate by myself? And I think you've seen me do that quite a few times when I pull out my little spreadsheet and start plugging in some of their numbers and see where I end up. Um, and then obviously, just like we talk about all the time, you know, all of the third party sources that we could use to sort of bring in additional info is really important. I like the platform. I want to see them win. Like, I hope, that it doesn't come across as me saying, like, oh, they're just trying to trick you or something. I don't necessarily think that's what they're doing. It's not like they're trying to pawn off a bad investment on you. Like, I think they would be perfectly happy if every single one of these deals was a great deal and everybody that came to the site made a lot of money. But at the same time, that's not what they see their job as, right? They're not trying to help you um, make good investment decisions to a certain extent, right? They're trying to help you. They're just trying to allow somebody else to come and put that property on their site and market it. And I think they do a little bit to verify that the information is accurate. They are getting an appraisal that you get to look at, and a couple of different things, things like that. But they're not weighing in on, um, okay, it's rented for, let's say it's rented for $2,000. The market rents $1,000. They're not saying anything about that, right? Like if you're in a situation where maybe you clearly have some fraud going on with a tenant. I don't think that that's something that they're really even looking at. Or if you are, you just happen to have a an above market lease that is not gonna, you don't expect to keep it, or maybe you're charging someone too high because nobody else would take them. Like that's not those situations you have to just find on your own, right? You have to figure out uh, the things that could go wrong. Um, I think I've pointed out quite a few that I think are just sort of absurd in the way that they're structured. They might be paying out a good yield at a certain point in time, but it's not necessarily it's not necessarily sustainable in any way. Or maybe some of them, maybe they paid out a good amount last month, but it's because a tenant caught up for 2 months of missed payments or something. And so all of those things, I think that I'd like to see done a little bit better. But I think I'm done complaining about Lofty today. That it really was not my goal. I really just want to point out that there it is. Um, Understanding what their goal is, and when you start to see things, and like it is, I mean, I actually do think when I look at the properties in this view, I'm probably more likely to buy them. They are more attractive than when I look at this and I see, oh, look at how, one, look at how terribly this performed, or look at how volatile it is, or, looking at, but I still go back to this one as my default because I'm looking at, okay, let me find all these cheap tokens. Oh, that is the cheapest I've seen that so far. I'm gonna have to take a look at that when we get off. Um, and that's what I do, right? Like, so I think that uh, one of the comments that they said that I thought was a little bit funny is they said, well, the power users just come in here and do this. And I think what they mean is like the real estate nerds like me that are spending a lot of time on here, really trying to dig into properties and like to have some of this additional, info right at your fingertips when you're picking out which one you're going to look at next. I think that's who they're referring to. Um, I think if you are not that person, if you're not going to be digging into every single one and trying to figure out what's the cash flow really and how durable is that cash flow, meaning, is it sustainable? Is it something that we're going to really experience every single month, or is it something that's going to be very cyclical? If you're not the person that's going to do that, it's probably not the best platform for you. If all I'm trying to do is look at what the numbers are and just pick a whole bunch of random ones and get some diversification, I'm probably going to go on ground floor and just buy notes on there. If that was, if that were my, and I think if you've watched any of my videos, I do own some ground floor notes, and I think that's a perfectly viable strategy. Um, I'm on here as well because I think some of the equity options on here as far as buying property itself versus buying debt on the property gives you the opportunity to make some bigger returns. But I think that if you're not the type of person who's willing to really dig into the properties themselves, you know, you shouldn't really just be looking at these tabs, taking a picture, seeing what the projected annual return is, and just clicking on it and going to town because oh, this is super interesting, right? Like if you look at these ones now, it shows a projected annual return. You'll notice there's no purple number. And that's because, like, for example, this one is not paying anything out. And instead of, making that clear on that front page, they're just showing, oh, that's too funny. So, just something to keep in mind, right? That their goal is to get you to click on properties and buy them, not necessarily to help you do the most thorough due diligence that you can, right? I mean, I think they're trying to present enough of that information so that you can feel like you're making a reasonable buying decision. But what I'm trying to get you to do every single day when I'm posting these videos is to just do a little bit more due diligence. I think that there are some awesome opportunities on here, um, but you really have to dig them up because it's not necessarily the ones that look just great. Oh, when you first click on there. Okay, obviously super tired, so I'm going to let you go for today. Until next time, I am just going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.